What's up guys, this is Elijah with Brooks Film Studios, and I want to introduce you to my Sony A6000. This is the camera I started video with in general. It's the camera that basically got me into video, because I originally bought this, hey, I'm going to make little videos and see what happens. This should be fun, it'll be cool. So this is the camera I started out with because it's what I could afford at the time, because I got this in 2000, right at the end of 2017 I believe, beginning of 2018. So I believe at that time, because there was the A6300 out at the time, and it was they always said it had an extreme amount of overheating issues. There was the Sony A7S cameras, that was like a dream, but I didn't have that money. And then there was the A6000 and the GH4 and a couple other cameras. Well, I got this camera, and it started out with it, which is what I started building my stuff with, and it was a good camera. I got a new camera. This is the camera I'm filming on right now. It's still been a good camera. I've had to do a couple things with it. Of course, I put a cage with a grip on it to beefing up the grip so I can grip better. I also typically, depending on when I shoot with it, I'll typically shoot with an external monitor, and I have a NPF 970 battery. I have an adapter I can run this camera off of that battery to kind of prevent overheating issues. It was a good starting camera for me, because especially for photos, this is a great camera. But you know, insanely fast autofocus. Sometimes it doesn't exactly grab the focus I want, but yeah, but it's been a good camera. But let me show you the camera that I ended up upgrading to when I decided I've outgrown this. And now we are recording on the A6000, and the new camera I have with me now is the Panasonic GH4. This is the camera I ended up switching to, and I'm going to explain to you why I ended up switching to this camera and how it's kind of gone so far. So some of the issues I was having with the Sony that made me want to look for another camera was because I want to start filming more weddings. I think that's the kind of industry I want to go towards. So I was like, I need gear that's better at doing that kind of shooting. So what I basically ended up with is the requirements of I needed unlimited recording time, no overheating under any circumstances, even if it's in the sun, and I also needed 4K, especially if I'm going to start charging higher prices and start, you know, getting work that looks good. I mean, I ain't saying you can't get work that doesn't look good in 1080p, but I would rather have 4K if I can. The main reason I needed 4K was for the better image quality, because right now I'm still delivering in 1080p. So by the time you take a 4K image and downscale that to 1080p, you're basically having a 4:1 compression ratio, which basically means your 1080p footage will actually look better than if it was shot in 1080p. And the other requirement I had was it needed to have extremely good battery life, because those little Sony batteries don't cut it. I don't like it. So I began the hunt looking, and the dream camera that I found that I want is the Panasonic GH4. Now naturally, it's still like $1,200 for the body, and that's not including any lenses, and like, you know, the Sony E-mount system. I could get an adapter, but I don't want to adapt because I still want to use autofocus. I mean, Panasonic's never had great continuous autofocus, but the single point autofocus where I can just like lock on and like manually focus myself, it actually works really good, because typically you can tap the screen and it'll focus wherever you tap. Now that being said, I do kind of miss the continuous autofocus of the Sony, because to an extent I can trust it, but I have had instances where it focused on the wrong thing I wanted it to. So for example, I was filming a wedding, and then while I was filming the wedding, we moved the camera. Well, I wasn't filming a wedding, it was a wedding my friend booked, but he ended up just renting out all my gear. So what we ended up doing was we basically took the Sony and set it up on the side Well, the autofocus grabbed focus on the bride's back, not on the preacher's face. Yeah, that was a little bit aggravating. So ultimately, a lot of times what I do with the Sony is I will have the autofocus go in, and then I'll have a button set to where it'll switch to manual focus, and it'll just lock and it won't move unless I touch that button to turn back on autofocus. So what I did with the GH4 is I have this button right here. This is a autofocus button. So anytime I have metering box, I can put the metering box on whatever I need, press this button, and it will automatically grab focus on that subject, and it will keep that focus because I have it set to manual focus. Now, I haven't tried autofocus continuous. Honestly, that's the way I ended up training myself to work, and that's what works best for me. And I should mention, another good point of 4K, having 4K, is the ability to recrop after you're done shooting. So typically you can actually zoom into a 4K image about 150%, especially if you're exporting in 1080p, with basically no quality loss. Now, that's as long as you're not using any kind of like digital zoom or something like that in the camera. The main disadvantage I've found with the GH4 is there is a crop in 4K, and when you are in 4K, that Panasonic has something called X-Teleconvert, which basically what it does is gives you like an additional 2 times crop on the image. It'll work in 1080p, but the thing is about X-Teleconvert is there is zero quality loss. Whereas if you use the digital zoom, there is a little bit of quality loss. Now that being said, X-Teleconvert doesn't work in 4K, but it works in 1080p. That aggravates me just a little bit, but it's been working for me so far. Another thing I should mention is while it does also shoot 4K, compared to my Sony A6000, the bit rate is significantly higher. Because on the Sony A6000, the bit rate for pretty much everything I do, so 1080p, 2430, and 60, is 50 megabits a second. I looked at the Panasonic G85 and like the G7. When you shoot 1080p at 60 frames a second, it actually only shoots at 20 megabits a second. That was a little bit of a bummer, but meet my GH4, 200 megabits a second at 1080p, 60 frames a second, and then 100 megabits a second in 4K at up to 30 frames a second. That's a significant jump from what I came from. Now granted, the file sizes on this sucker are massive, but it's worth it. I'll buy more hard drives, it's fine. And while we're on the trail of all those things, I should mention, this does have unlimited recording. I have recorded with this in 4K. I believe I did this once outdoors, and it was a little bit warm. No overheating issues. I had my Sony running at the same time, and the little overheating icon popped up. Now granted, it never shut off. At the same time, I was running the external monitor with the power adapter going into it to try to pull some of the heat, move some of the heat out of the camera, but the overheating icon still came up. Now I will say too, I did hack the Sony to where it would have unlimited recording, so it would record as long as I feed it power and memory. Luckily the cameras never shut off on me, but the fact that the overheating icon shows up at all makes me uneasy, and it frankly scares me just a little bit. Because at the moment I only got 2 cameras, so if the other camera dies, I only got 1. I'd rather not deal with that. So this has fixed a lot of the issues I have. It's really gave me peace of mind anytime I'm recording, and it's great. And one other thing about the GH4, the screen is fully articulating. So I can put it whatever position I want. And on top of that, it's a bright screen, because I could even be shooting outdoors in the sun and still see my screen, whilst the A6000, I could kind of see the screen. Like, I'm not saying it wasn't as bright as the GH4, but on top of that, it wasn't a sharp screen. On this, I can actually tell when things are out of focus. On the A6000, it's more of like it's just not sharp enough for you to tell if it's in focus, out of focus, so you have to rely on focus peaking, which I still use focus peaking in this camera too, I would just rather have that articulated screen. Plus, especially those times like if I decide I'm going to vlog, I can use the articulated screen and actually see myself on the screen. And especially when I'm filming these videos too, I can use this screen and see myself. Or this also works with the Panasonic app where I can live view myself and hit stop recording. I know some of the newer Sonys have that, but the A6000 does not have that. So that was aggravating. I think at the time when I bought the A6000, the A6300 was still $600, and if you went to record in 4K, there was pretty much a lot of people saying it would overheat almost instantly, and I didn't want to deal with that. So now I can record in 4K and not worry about overheating. Now as far as the build quality goes between these two cameras, I had to add the cage on the A6000 to make it more hand-holdable. Is that a word? Hand-holdable. The grip on it just wasn't that great. So, but on the GH4, I don't need no cage, because this has an insanely beefy hand grip, which granted is more of a traditional DSLR style body, but it's nice and I like it because it's a very firm grip, which I have smaller hands. I don't have big hands. So for me, the grip is actually really nice compared to the A6000 where I had to add that wooden handle to increase the grip on it. And plus, buttons galore. Like I got this button, I got this button, I got this button, I got this wheel, I got this style, this other button, this other button, this other button. And on top of that, majority of these buttons, I can actually customize and set them to whatever I want. One button set to where I can adjust my frame rates. By the way, this does have setting in here where you can adjust the shutter to, instead of by setting it to a certain speed, you can set it to degree. So anytime I change my shutter speed, I set it to 180 degrees, it will automatically adjust my shutter according to my frame rate. So I don't have to go in and do that math myself. But I do have one button set to adjust my frame rate, another one to bring up my histogram and take it off if I need to. This also has I also have another button set to adjust my peaking. Then on top of here you have dedicated buttons for your white balance. In the A6000 I had to go into the menu to find the white balance. That was aggravating. So I have a dedicated button for my white balance, ISO, and something else. I don't know what this button does. I really have no idea what that button does. And then I have 2 dials dedicated to adjusting f-stop and shutter speed. So I never have to go into a menu. If anything, I have to hit a button. And the only thing I have to hit a button for is ISO. While on the A6000, I had one dial, and that was for f-stop. But then I have to hit a button for both ISO and a button for f-stop. Or no, shutter speed. It was one or the other. Plus, this has a built-in time-lapse mode, which is nice. I actually used it once, because the other time I forgot. Yeah, while I was with the A6000, if I wanted to do a time-lapse, I had to go and download an app. And there's an app in the camera that requires you to use the time-lapse. It's kind of aggravating. I don't like it, but you do what you gotta do. And one other cool feature I do enjoy about the GH4, it has an SD card slot on the side. So while I was with the A6000, the SD card is inside the battery compartment. So I have to take the camera off of a tripod if I ever wanted to change the SD card. Which granted, by the time I needed to change the SD card, I also had to change the battery because the battery's only lasted like 45 minutes. So I felt better knowing the SD card's on the side and I can access that easier than I can the battery. So I can actually switch out SD cards without even having to take it off the tripod. But the lens I have on here is the 12-35 f2.8, which reminds me of something I forgot about. The way sensors are, you have full frame, APS-C, and then micro four thirds. This is a micro four thirds sensor. The A6000 has an APS-C sensor, which has a crop of 1.5 or 1.6, because it's an APS-C sensor. So For example, if I have a lens that's 16 millimeters, so for example, 60 millimeters is really equivalent to 25 on a full frame camera. A micro four thirds sensor has a 2 times crop. 12 to 35 is really a 24 to 70 because you have to multiply each focal length by 2. Honestly, it's not that big of a deal once you fully understand that, and then you can kind of adjust your thinking to what lens you need or what focal length you need depending on what kind of shot you need. Also, while I was thinking about it, when I said batteries, this is the Sony A6000 battery, this is the GH4 battery. This is 1100 milliamp hours versus 2000 milliamp hours. I have actually, fun fact, I actually recorded an entire sermon for my church. I think I recorded for an hour straight in 1080p. I believe I lost a bar, like a singular bar, with one of these giant batteries. I will definitely take that as an improvement. And the final thing I loved about the GH4 that made me really want it, the Sony A6000 doesn't have a microphone jack. So I had to use a microphone that attached directly to the hot shoe mount. If it ever got loose, it just had weird static and input, and there was literally 2 microphones that existed that could attach directly to the hot shoe mount like that. There was like 1 or 2 things I could have done, but that was also very expensive. But with the GH4, it has a headphone. It has a microphone and a headphone jack. So I can actually attach a microphone like this, the Deity D3. By the way, this mic was only $100, and I believe the microphone I got for the Sony was also around $100. But the sound quality from this one is much better. That's pretty much everything I had to say. So thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, leave me a comment down below. I'll see if I can respond to you. I will try to link to both of these cameras in the description below. If you like this video, give it a like. If you disliked it, well, then you know where that button's at. And remember to subscribe if you enjoy my content. But anyway guys, I hope you have a good one. I'll catch you in the next video.